Where do you go after you saved the world? What do you do after the whole multiverse almost collapsed? Well, tonight I'm going to explore from the writer's side. And welcome back to the heart of the stories we tell. I'm Rob the host, and this is another look deep into what makes a story, a theory on storytelling by a storyteller who believes that every story has merit. And tonight's episode is when and how to raise the stakes. Now, this has a lot of thought going into it. It started with people doing stuff about the Berlantiverse, but really it could have to do with any comic book movie, any comic book show. Hell, just about any action adventure. Because at the end of the day, just because you save the world, the universe, the galaxy, doesn't mean that you don't need to save it again. If you're interested in this and more, click that subscribe button, activate alerts, and let's get started. Specifically, in the Berlantiverse, they already had a big crossover, Heroes vs. Aliens, and in that, they dealt with an alien invasion. Now, in the comic books, there's already been an infinite gauntlet throwdown, and you know what? In the movies, the MCU's getting ready to do the same thing. A big, I became God because I am the master of time, space, the soul, power, the mind, reality itself. So the question becomes, how do you step up? How do you make a movie that stakes are higher than Thanos having the Infinity Gauntlet, or the entire world being ruled by the Dominators? And my answer is, at least in the short term, you don't have to. See, the comic book answer has been there all along. Just because you did something once, just because you saved the whole world, doesn't mean you have to do it again and again and again. In fact, you get kind of blasé to it after a while. So instead, my suggestion is, we go into smaller things. We look at the fact that a mentor and a mentee, student, relationship. We look at what happens when the team of equals come together. We look at what happens when people who are used to not dealing with superpowers stand up and go, oh, wait a minute, this person has the power of a god. And basically just how these friendships form. An interlinked look at how these heroes perform. At the end of the day, just because the world got saved once doesn't mean that purse snatchers don't have to be stopped tomorrow. In fact, that's what you were fighting for. That's why you tried to stop Thanos. That's why you tried to stop the alien invasion. Because you want to be able to tomorrow stop the bank robbery. Now, I know what you're going to say. What type of evil can you combat once you've beaten the ultimate evil? Well, the true test there is, there's lots of things. Just because you got lucky and pushed it all against one foe, doesn't mean you're never going to be challenged by any. Let's hear, thanks to Emergency Awesome, exactly what the Berlanti people have to say.
I feel like each crossover has topped the previous one. So, topping last year's, that's a high bar. If for no other reason than, what do you do that's bigger than aliens? We've got some, I think, very, very exciting ideas. Very early on in the process, actually, of doing last year's crossover, Greg said that there's probably, no way to get bigger than aliens. The best way to make the crossover, next year's crossover, this year's crossover, especially epic, is if you can increase the sort of, bombast, increase the emotional stakes and the emotional payoffs. So that's, a very oblique, comment on where our heads are at, here for this season.
So let's talk about that for a second. Let's be honest. They could top aliens. They have access to everything in the comics. They can do God. But my main thesis here is that they shouldn't do that. They shouldn't try to top themselves. See, that's the problem. And it's a problem that this series of shows itself can really, really learn from. You don't need someone to be faster than the last villain the Flash faced. You don't need someone to be more Batman-like than the last villain the Arrow faced. You don't even need to be someone that's stronger than Supergirl, or stronger than the last villain Supergirl fought. For all the good and the bad that comes from being associated with superheroes and comic books, they've gotten one thing really right over the years, and that's because they've had to keep publishing. Instead of raising the stakes, you vary them. Hey, today I'm going to save the world. Tomorrow, I'm going to save the city. The day after that, I'm going to stop a bank robber. But then you know what? I'm back to saving the city. and then I'm back to saving the world. You know why? Because that's how we're going to vary it up. Like Mr. Incredible says, I feel like the maid. Didn't I just clean this place up? When I compared the three Harrys of urban fantasy, Harry Dresden and Harry Potter really could almost be in the same world, except their magic rules are different. Harry Dresden constantly is escalating and escalating and escalating, and you know what? The writers found that to be a problem. It's why we haven't had a book in over a year now. Actually, closer to 3 years than a year. Because every time he makes things harder on Harry, he makes Harry more powerful, he makes the bad guys more powerful to compensate, and as such, he's running into a problem. And that problem's pretty easy to see coming. Once you've escalated too high, you don't know where to go but down. But we're not limited to books, and definitely not limited to fantasy for this problem. When talking about tropes, I talked about Star Trek, and I talked about villain decay. And part of villain decay is, hey, we upped the stakes too high, and now we need to kind of lower them. The Borg can't be that big of a threat. The Dominion and the Jem'Hadar can't be that big of a threat. And why? Because you just can't constantly tell stories at that heightened level of, oh my god, we're gonna lose. So I already covered that in the flashback Thursday, the second one, that there was an Infinite Gauntlet story. So the Marvel MCU has something to draw from. They have the fact that a third of the galaxy was destroyed. The greater powers had nothing to stop them. The Infinity Gauntlet had to be broken up. But at the end of the day, the next week, 2 weeks later, Spider-Man was stopping a thief from robbing a liquor store. Why? Because little things matter too. I want you to think about this. If tomorrow you were told, oh my god, the company you work for is going to go out of business unless we can get this project done right now. We need to work our butts off. If you work your butts off, the company stays in business and everything's doing well. That doesn't mean that 2-3 months later when you're told, oh, we're not going to get our bonus checks if we don't do this project that's going to have twice as much leeway as the last one we did. You'd still work your butt off at getting that bonus. You'd still work your butt off. There would still be consequences. The stakes are lower, but the stakes are still real. And hell, you could even just be told, hey, look, this isn't really a priority, but here's your next job to do. And there's still some stakes there, even though there's no priority to it. You still have to deal with, I need to get this job done. In the world of superheroes, in the world of comic books, the stakes could literally be anything. And stopping Kingpin's plan is important, but so is stopping the Shatari invasion. And when you work and you alternate, it doesn't seem like you're really downgrading. It does the first time, maybe, but if you alternate right, what you're going to find is that people are going to care every time. And if they care about your characters, then they care about any stakes. But what do you think? Do you think that Marvel's going to have a problem coming up with something to beat the Infinite Gauntlet? Do you think they should even try? I'd really be interested in hearing your thoughts down below. And don't forget about the alien invasion over in the Berlantiverse. Do you think they need to raise the stakes, or do you think that they're just fine doing a crossover? As I said in my Berlantiverse thing, I honestly thought crossover should be more happening. Every time there's a speedster problem, people should call Flash. Every time there's a time travel problem, people should call the Legends. And if you're in over your head, why not reach out to a friend for help? So my main point is that you can't just keep raising the stakes, or sooner or later, you just hit ridiculous points. And I'm going to just say, the Blade trilogy kinda did that. You start off with a pretty simple story, Daywalker fighting vampires, but then you need to make better vampires, and then you need to make a super killer expert team that can hunt and kill those vampires. Then you need to make even more super vampires. Why? Wasn't it dangerous enough for him to just fight vampires? Then again, who knows? Star Wars has made like $1 billion, $2 billion easily, just by building bigger super weapons. Then again, Empire Strikes Back is the most popular of the movies so far, and I have to say, it had no Death Star. But we've reached that point of the week where I need to ask you to like and share this video, click that subscribe button, and enable alerts so that we can build a community. Of course, I'd love to hear what you think. I'd really like to talk to you guys about this. How high do you think the stakes should go? And do you think that fluctuating is better than just always raising? Either way, join me back here next time. In the meantime, I hope you have a good night, and thank you for walking with me through the heart of the stories we tell.